A chill descended on the trading floors on February 1st, 2026. CME Group, the titan of global derivatives markets, slid a notification into the hands of traders. It was an unassuming Friday afternoon, yet the quiet announcement would soon echo like a thunderclap through the corridors of finance. Silver, that precious metal, often cast as both guardian against inflation and a wild speculative ride, would within hours face what could only be described as a margin call of the century. The implications were insidious. The CME's message was simple but deadly in its precision. Margin requirements on silver futures would rise significantly. For traders operating on the thin edge of leverage, this was a call to arms, or rather, a call to cash. Deposits needed to be bolstered, accounts reevaluated. Those ill-prepared or overextended had to act quickly or risk being swept away in a tide of forced liquidations. The mechanism was clinical. Increase the cost of holding a position and watch the over-leveraged crumble. By Monday, the marketplace was a battleground. For many, the weekend had offered no respite, no time to recalibrate strategies or secure emergency funds. It was a calculated play by the CME to head off a speculative bubble perhaps, or simply to adjust to evolving conditions. But for many traders, it felt like a noose swiftly tightening. The liquidations began in a frenzied, relentless cascade. Positions were closed, prices plummeted, and what had begun as a quiet readjustment exploded into a wildfire of market panic. This was not just a story of numbers and margins, it was a visceral, nerve-shredding reminder of how quickly tides can shift in the financial universe. The notification by CME was the match. The volatile mix of speculation and leverage was the powder keg. Traders who had watched silver soar now faced its fall, all within the suffocating confines of a single weekend. The silver squeeze had become a silver suffocation, and as phones rang off their cradles and screens blinked red, a singular truth emerged. These weren't just contracts being sold off. They were dreams, just as quickly turned to dust. Silver's journey from audacious heights to the depths below began with an unassuming numeric jolt. The price, once a defiant $120, now tumbled to $71.76. Behind that stark drop lay a systemic chokehold, masterfully orchestrated by the CME's decision to hike initial margin requirements. For those of you wondering, an initial margin is the minimum amount of equity that must be deposited before a trade is made, a safeguard, ostensibly, against volatility. Yet in this instance, it was akin to pressing the panic button on an elevator plummeting groundward. Margin hikes are not unprecedented. They're tools of balance, yet when applied in a market already teetering at the edge, they become the executioner's axe. Historically, silver has danced to its own rhythm, at times a symphony, at others a cacophony. In February 2026, it was the latter, with CME as the conductor unwittingly or wittingly orchestrating chaos. The increase in margin requirements wasn't a mere adjustment of numbers. It was a seismic shift. Traders overloaded with debt found themselves cornered. They were left to claw and scramble, trying desperately to shore up cash or liquidate their positions at devastating losses. Imagine a dam, structures cracking under unforeseen pressure. Water seeps through minute fissures before bursting forth, unstoppable, indiscriminate. The rise in initial margin acted similarly. As the new requirements came into force, it rippled through the market like pressure building within a dam, straining the integrity of trading strategies hinged heavily on borrowed money. These adjustments, aimed at stabilizing, in actuality destabilized. Why did silver fall so dramatically? The CME's decision was logical on paper, but catastrophic in practice. It magnified vulnerabilities, exposed over-leveraged positions, and forced capitulation on an industrial scale. The absence of liquidity and the mandatory clearing of these positions turned what should have been individual ruinations into a collective undoing. The implications were immediate. As prices nosedived, so did confidence. The psychology of the market shifted from bullish optimism to outright fear. Financial medics in the trading pits and offices worldwide might have called it a correction, yet here, euphemisms found no solace. The chilling reality was raw and pervasive, spilling into every corner of the trading universe. There are rare times when individuals witness the morphing face of finance, where columns of dry numbers transform into living, breathing narratives of triumphs and tragedies. February 2026 was one such inflection, a moment in time forever etched into the collective memory of those who weathered its storm. The structural integrity of the market was tested, revealing vulnerabilities and dependencies that few had anticipated. And it's here, amidst the dust and debris, that the true nature of volatility revealed itself. One entity's mechanism, a margin call meant to protect, inadvertently became the harbinger of widespread financial collapse. Traders, once buoyed by ambition, stood hollowed out in the aftermath, grappling with losses unfathomable mere days before. Silver had suffered, traders had suffered. But the market, it continued its inexorable march, indifferent to the casualties left behind. The perfect storm had passed, yet its echoes remained, a cautionary tale of leverage, liquidity, and the fine line between order and chaos. Imagine the marketplace as a finely tuned orchestra, each instrument integral to the harmony. Now envision the sudden removal of a crucial section. The strings, perhaps. The music falters, discordant. This is precisely what happened between February 1st and 2nd, 2026. It wasn't merely a fluctuation in silver prices, it was the sudden stifling of liquidity, the withdrawal of confidence that had been the underpinning beat of the entire market symphony. As CME preparations unfolded over that fateful weekend, traders and lawyers alike knew they were stepping onto a tightrope strung high above a chasm of uncertainty. When CME delivered its missive, new margin requirements to fortify against volatility, the silent echo of keyboards clicking furiously in backrooms indicated awareness. Yet few understood it for what it was, the countdown to an implosion. Friday's announcement casually scrolled across screens late in the trading day. It landed softly, but its aftershocks reverberated with ever-increasing intensity as the weekend progressed. Phones buzzed with the urgency of a coming storm. Margin calls loomed large, demanding preparedness as traders reevaluated their positions, calculating the inconceivable. Sunday morphed into an illusory calm. The financial world held its breath, awaiting Monday's maelstrom. Trades were pruned diligently, but urgency turned to panic as the clock struck market hour. A chain reaction of sell-offs ignited. The dam of liquidity was breached. What followed was a cascade, an unstoppable torrent dragging prices into the abyss. Amidst this, many realized the futility of resistance. Futures contracts were liquidated not in a controlled burn, but as a wildfire consuming forests of paper profits, livelihoods torched in moments. Margin requirements, once safeguards, turned predatory in nature. They demanded not just sacrifices, but entire portfolios, cast into fire sales by dawn. In hindsight, the weekend foresaw the frenzy. Theories bloomed like spring, each hypothesis fraught with hindsight bias. Greed mutated into fear, and despite all, the market's machine relentlessly chewed through the wreckage, devoid of empathy or contemplation. Some called it a lesson, a testament to the dangers of asymmetrical risk and blind faith in a protection system. But for those caught in its jaws, it was a reckoning, a baptism by financial fire, leaving scorched earth in its wake. This was volatility in its purest form, raw and unforgiving. February 2nd wasn't merely a page in a history book. It was a chapter of systemic undoing, a symphony not of harmony, but of cacophony. And once the dust settled, the world watched not what had been lost but wondered, what next could possibly emerge from this scarred landscape? In each silence following the crash, traders recalibrated their approaches, haunted by the ghost notes of those days. History has a cruelty of repeating itself with impeccable timing. The silver market, February 2026, was a realm that knew volatility well, yet it still stumbled into a calamity reminiscent of the Hunt brothers debacle. Back then, it was supposed to be a conquest. Two brothers thought they could corner the market. They believed their silver fortress unassailable, until it wasn't. Over 4 decades later, echoes of that past danced through February's chaos, where margin calls cascaded like dominoes, toppling futures unrelentingly. The 1980 Hunt brothers event was infamous. They amassed silver with reckless abandon, driving prices to an astronomical $50 per ounce. Regulators soon clipped their wings, liquidity dried, and panic ensued. Fast forward to 2026, and the resemblance was uncanny, albeit in different guises. Institutional magnates and algorithms played protagonists in this modern theater of markets, blind to the lessons learned through the march of time. In both tales, leverage was the siren's call. For the Hunts, it was loans underpinning an empire that stumbled upon regulatory disdain. In our contemporary saga, leverage manifested through derivatives, dressed smarter, intricate, yet essentially the same old cipher of risk. Only the number of participants had multiplied, the stage now global, and stakes towering beyond comprehension. On that February weekend, traders grasped at straws, poring over past data and old scars. February's descent was prompted not by greed, as in 1980, but by defensive maneuvers and institutional safeguards. Yet the outcome was tragically similar. A market hemorrhaging value amidst fear-fueled liquidation, systemic stress, and a palpable dread of insolvency, quietly echoing through the ticking of electronic clocks. The trading statistics bore testament. They sketched a portrait of frantic activity, where positions once merely speculative became life rafts in turbulent waters. Contract volumes spiked, spreads widened, and volatility indexes climbed a skyward route. Even amidst the maelstrom, analytics painted the inevitable story. Margin requirements pressed on profits till nothing remained but dust, echoes, and regret. What differentiated then from now was speed. In 80, the crash took weeks, creeping with a methodical inevitability. February 2026 unfurled within days. CME's margin hike was the match, striking Neolithic tinder that burned through assumptions of stability. Change came with unsparing quickness, reminding everyone of the frailty plugged into our financial arteries. This wasn't merely nostalgia for the foolish optimism of cornered markets. It wasn't merely a lesson in systemic implosions or the finite elasticity of trust. Rather, it was a stark unveiling of how delicate models of safety can buckle under stress and how devious volatility can be. In silver's turbulent course that weekend, we witnessed an echo of history, a stark reminder that in the calculus of markets, sometimes the question is not if history will rhyme, but when. As February drew its dark curtain, markets reeled, a somber hush prevailing. Traders huddled with their screens and analysts with their charts, each pondering the skirmishes ahead, knowing the battle was far from over. They grasped that similarities to the past weren't mere happenstance, but perhaps prelude to repeat performances in this never-ending market opera. The scene now was set for what history might yet choose to reveal in its relentless cyclical telling. In the aftermath of this tumultuous February weekend, the parallels with the past became not just lessons in repetition, but ominous warnings of what lay ahead. The history of the silver market is a saga woven with narratives of human ambition, greed, and the relentless pursuit of wealth, shadowed by the inevitability of risk spiraling out of control. It's a cyclical drama where each cycle adds layers of complexity and a heightened stakes game. This chapter brings us to a point of reflection, probing the historic scars of the silver market that never quite healed. We harken back to the 1980 Hunt brothers debacle, that spectacular chase for a silver corner. The Hunt brothers' ambition set off a chain of events fueled by leverage and speculation, culminating in the eventual collapse. It was a grand lesson in economic hubris, etched into the annals of financial lore. But what February 2026 demonstrated was how history, with its penchant for theater, can repeat with devastating modernity. The same spectrum of greed, hubris, and regulatory oversight returned, dressed in the new clothes of derivatives and digital trades. The Hunt brothers' attempt was archaic compared to today's labyrinth of financial instruments, but the semantics remained unchanged. Leverage is a double-edged sword. Now let's paint the cold, hard scene of February 1st and 2nd. As the CME issued its margin call, traders worldwide awoke to a reality splintering at the edges. The thought of losing vast fortunes overnight sent tremors across the globe, as margin requirements surged like a lifeblood turned sour. On the surface, electronic tickers reflected chaos through cascading numbers, while below, traders grappled with unprecedented challenges. Positions that once denoted bullish optimism now signaled desperate cries for safety. The trading statistics from those days are harrowing. They reveal a market reckoning, a pandemonium where liquidity evaporated faster than it ever could have liquidated, where spreads and volatility, those harbingers of despair, climbed unprecedented heights. But this was no Hunt folly reborn. The fabric weaving through February's market collapse was intricately contemporary. It was driven less by individual audacity and more by systemic vulnerabilities, an unforgiving algorithm singing a tune composed of derivatives and excessive leverage. The CME's margin hikes were a blaring siren, a countermeasure meant to ensure stability, but instead ignited the fields of speculation into a catastrophic blaze. A nudge meant to shore up the financial dikes resulted in wrenching open the floodgates. This wasn't simply a throwback to the 80s. It was an accelerated illustration of how interconnected today's global markets are, how one domino falling can set off a sequence reaching the farthest corners of this financial tapestry. We must anchor ourselves in these historical lessons, recognizing the fragile constructs of our markets. The Hunt debacle taught that markets don't just react, they reenact. And February's modern unraveling warned us of an unseen thread linking past and present. A century's worth of fiscal storytelling entrapped in these few days, a stark reminder of how closely financial stability is tied to collective, oft-repeated follies. As we stand poised on the threshold of what comes next, the past echoes in our minds. A relentless, cyclical reminder that in the confounding dance of markets, hubris can rewrite history, but never erase its traces. That February weekend was not an anomaly. It was a script already penned, a cautionary tale of when financial ambition brews faster than stability can catch up. Traders, analysts, and onlookers alike sit at the precipice of history's mirror, confronted by reflections both familiar and foreboding. They know well, markets possess a language all their own, rhythmic yet volatile, celebrating highs as assuredly as sealing lows. As they chart the unknown paths forward, a poignant certainty lingers. Lessons unheeded inevitably become lessons retold. Sunday, February 1st, 2026. In the hallowed halls of India's bustling commodity exchanges, a storm brewed silently. Market insiders sensed the change, felt the chill, a prelude to an impending disaster that lay just beyond the horizon. The signs were there, buried in the seemingly mundane fluctuations of silver's spot price, veiled by typical weekend inertia. But beneath that facade, the air was electric, ripe with the acrid scent of an oncoming financial conflagration. In these machinations of market forces, nothing is ever truly quiet. The global ripple effect began in earnest, as the East's awakening set the stage for a cascade that would travel swift as shadows, sparking chaos by the time the West came online. Here, in India's perfect storm of over-leveraged positions and imported undercurrents, the seeds of Monday's nightmare took root. As the first wave of forced liquidations loomed, panic set in like a contagion. Traders frantically recalculated, reassessed, and in many cases, resigned. Silver futures, once a bedrock of institutional portfolios, now mirrored uncertainty, each tick a kernel of anxiety. The Indian market's sundown became the world's sunrise, a cruel twist of fate and time zones where the dawn meant anything but renewal. The triggers, plentiful and pointed, and all pointing to the same conclusion. Where once there lay possibility, now there lay only peril. February 1st wasn't an aberration. It was a precise prelude, a sobering reminder that markets operate within a web of unseen connections. Their reach, vast, their impact, unbounded. As Sunday ebbed away, an ominous tension settled over the fiscal landscape, a portent of Monday's unraveling, where opportunity and risk entwined would become indistinguishable. By February 2nd, the cascade was in full swing. Panic buttoned down across continents, a synchronized symphony of sell-offs. In the glare of CME's margin hike, necessity dictated decisions. Desperation fueled transactions. Investors, caught in this tumultuous dance, saw their portfolios shrink to shadows of their former selves. The forced sale of futures contracts sent reverberations across oceans, each one echoing louder, more insistently than the last. Markets broke hard. And the Indian market, silent witness, catalyst caught in the crossfire, stood amidst the rubble, a stark reminder of finance's fickleness. Silver's once bright gleam dulled in the aftermath, tarnished not just by the weight of trades, but by the gravity of human oversight. This was not merely a regional debacle. It was a globally synchronized shift. The cascading liquidations thus marked a demarcation line in the market's history. They became legend upon legend. Cautionary tales whispered from one generation of traders to the next about those February days when the dominion of silver was built, unbuilt, and rebuilt again. A complex cycle bound up with human nature and international tides, a warning bell tolling for those who might believe themselves immune. The markets had spoken, shaped by invisible hands, yet leaving undeniable trails for all who dared to follow. A new domino had entered this precarious arrangement. February 3rd, 2026, bore witness to another shock rippling through already turbulent waters. Kevin Warsh, an economist whose mere name sparked either dread or admiration, stepped onto the stage. His Senate confirmation as chair of the Federal Reserve, the Warsh Shock, sent a tremor that destabilized an already shaky foundation. Why the alarm? For the uninitiated, Warsh was the herald of tight monetary policy. He embodied hawkish scrutiny in an era thirsty for dovish nurture. His tenure meant higher interest rates, less liquidity, a sea change in market sentiment. Investors, already reeling, recognized the storm on the horizon. The implications of Warsh's nomination extended far beyond Washington's reach. It signaled a shift, a reorientation of risk priorities. Suddenly, every leverage play, every borrowed dollar, bore the mark of exposure. Silver, already bludgeoned by margin calls and liquidations, found itself increasingly isolated amid these macroeconomic headwinds. Risk perception, like a living entity, mutated almost instantaneously. In moments, calculations once considered safe became precarious. Fortunes built on the thinnest margins were at the mercy of an indifferent machine, a financial apparatus in which Warsh was both conductor and composer. Warsh's appointment transformed the very soil of market psychology. It unnerved even the most seasoned traders. A policy regime change of this magnitude advised caution before action, prudence before enthusiasm. Those tethered to the old ways of calculable risk soon found themselves adrift in Warsh's unyielding current. It's crucial to note this. Warsh didn't operate in isolation. His presence was the thread binding a broader tapestry, woven from years of macroeconomic imbalances and speculative swings. His debut as the Federal Reserve's chair punctuated a crescendo of market vulnerabilities. The fundamental landscape was set for upheaval, each contorted nuance of policy echoing through the canyons of Wall Street like the footfalls of an advancing yet unseen titan. Enter the transformation, where once predictable rhythms gave way to frantic reconfigurations and paradigms long held, began their inexorable crumble. And so, amid Warsh's ascent, the precious metal markets, silver at their heart, struggled, scrupulously recalibrating in real time. The savage beauty of finance unfolded, revealing how quickly one hand's market was another's curtain call. The Warsh Shock had arrived, and its reverberations would be felt far and wide, finding echoes not just in economic theory, but in the ledger books of traders and investors worldwide. Indeed, the financial world braced itself, caught between past certainties and future vagaries. Silver's story intertwined with global monetary shifts, emblematic of transition's tumult. Unyielding, relentless, and inexorable. These were the forces now in play, forces that would not be stilled. Forces that spelled either doom or destiny for those who ventured into the fiscal abyss with eyes wide open.